Hey guys, Bido here to tell you about the latest from Blood Incantation, Absolute Elsewhere, out October 4th on Century Media Records. The album has 6 tracks, 44 minutes in length, and this is the band's third full-length studio album. They are an American death metal band. To approach the construction of this record or the design of this album, I have to mention that those 6 tracks are technically 2. You have the Stargate and the Message. Each of these songs is divided into 3 chapters, Tablet 1, Tablet 2, and Tablet 3. So there are a lot of similarities between the construction and the overall arching premises of each of these 2 songs, and the way they're presented and the way they're executed. This allows the record to offer you 2 different, slightly different sides of the exact same coin. It's a design and it's an approach that's not new to the band, but I feel like it fits their way of thinking and their way of creating, and definitely makes for an interesting perspective. Because if you think about this album from an album listening experience, you really have just 2 tracks, and it's about navigating through those 2 songs in the best way possible. But if you're approaching this record more from an individuality standpoint, then you perhaps will be able to take something out of the album and enjoy it in a more restricted way. I don't think this record is designed for that, even though it allows it to be that way. This is really a record that needs the listener to commit to it from beginning to end and not necessarily look at the different chapters of this journey, but rather at the individual journeys that these 2 sides of the same coin represent. As far as the sound is concerned, this album has a very esoteric experience. It's an album that for the fans of the band is going to be an easy connection with. It's going to be an album that sound-wise it's going to be easy to understand, process, and grasp, because you're going to be familiar with a lot of the textures, with a lot of the executions. But for those in the periphery, this album is completely going to miss the mark. And that's why it has that kind of esoteric experience. It really alienates all of those that are not necessarily part of the inner circle. It's a very difficult album to understand, to comprehend, to digest, to even to navigate if the band is new to you and you're not quite familiar with this approach to death metal. They have a very particular sound, and this album carries on their particular sound. An album that at times feels like your prototypical death metal sounding record, both musically and vocally, with harsh vocals and also with that heavy riffing sound that matches up with a very heavy drum sound to create this sense of brutality, create a sense of thickness, volume, and heaviness that just comes at the listener with a lot of intensity and a lot of aggression. But then it also has those more atmospheric, sci-fi, I would go as far to say as even psychedelic moments that allows the tracks to become a lot more ambient, and the track goes in different directions, creating some of the moments within the songs, almost creating a narrative to kind of paint a more vivid picture of the sci-fi experience that the tracks put forward. So this ability to have these 2 different worlds, one of more atmospheric sound with sci-fi psychedelic elements, more progressive elements as well, and then the more prototypical straightforward, narrow, thick, and heavy death metal sound seems like a hard combination to achieve, but the band has really been able to create their DNA off of achieving that sort of ambiance. In some records you have a lot more of the atmospheric side, and some records you have a lot more of the death metal side, but I feel like this album offers a nice combination of the 2, where you have some songs that the pendulum moves more towards one, some songs it moves more towards the other, and then there are certain tracks where it's more about creating ebbs and flows between the 2. So it's an interesting album sound-wise, an album that feels very rich, that sounds very textured, that offers a lot of technicality from the guitar standpoint, very progressive at times, but also very straightforward and very mundane in terms of the death metal, the more straightforward death metal sound approach. When it comes into the vocals are perhaps the least important experience out of this album. I felt like the vocals in certain moments of this record, in certain chapters of this record, or I should say in certain tablets of this record, feel more like an element of atmosphere, an element of sound, really truly coming across as an instrument more so than in your prototypical death metal album. Now, in the second half of the album, in the message side of the record, the vocals become a lot more important. They become a lot more predominant. They have a more clear guide and a clear, precise view on what the impact is going to be, and they help propel the songs and the overall journey of that portion in a much better way. In the first half, the Stargate, the vocals play a much lesser important role. It's more about creating atmosphere and creating place holders where you can kind of find your way through the maze until you get to a little bit more clarity. Overall, this is an album that I have to say is my favorite album from the band. I'm not a huge Blood Incantation fan by no means. I've always felt like I've been more on the periphery of their music, finding very hard to digest some of their albums, some of their songs, their EPs. I just have a difficult time grasping what they're trying to create, or at least staying connected with what they're trying to create. I felt this album, because of the heavier, straightforward death metal influence in most of the tracks, I was able to stay connected with these tracks and the album in general for a longer period of time. So it was a little bit more accessible to me. It didn't feel like it was too far out there for me to be able to reach, even though there are moments on this record where are beyond my comprehension. But overall, when I look at this album, it was an album that I pretty much stayed with it from beginning to end, and I was able to enjoy it a lot more than I was expecting coming in. As far as favorite songs are concerned, breaking down into these chapters, I want to start off with the Stargate Tablet 1. This is the opening track on the record, and I think this track has great importance. For any journey, for any path that you take, the first step is one of the most important, so is the last one. And this is the first step for the listener into this journey, into this path. It's an important track from that standpoint. It's also an important track from the sonic experience that it offers, because it really opens up that first half and it sets the table for what the Stargate as a track, as a single song, as a single entity is going to be all about. This blend of heavy death metal, really heavy death metal, with a lot of brutality mixed in with that more sci-fi atmospheric ambient experiences with a progressive touch, allows the overall instrumentation of the Stargate to become the focal point of what these tracks and what that first piece of the puzzle is all about. It really reflects well into the idea of the album. Then we have the message Tablet 1. So this is the first chapter of the second overall track, if you will. The guitars and drums in this song create a very nice textured and driven experience. It starts in a little bit more calm. It brings in a lot of brutality, a lot of heaviness, a little bit of a narrow experience, if you will. The vocals add to that heaviness and to that brutality because of the sheer darkness and heaviness that they carry. And it finds ways of creating some calmer pockets as the one that the song opens up with. This allows the overall brutality of the track, the overall heaviness of the track, to be a little bit easier to digest, to be a little bit easier to process, because you don't have these extended periods without any single break, without any single light. So it's a song that reflects well in the design of the album, and it's designed well into engaging the listener with that second half, with that second overall chapter that the album has in store for the listener. And then the album finishes off with the message Tablet 3. This is the longest song on the record, over 11 minutes in length, but not just because of the length. The impact of this song is also represented in the sound and the vocal approach. It's the most textured, the richest sounding song, and I think it's also the heaviest sounding song on the entire album, at least from a consistent standpoint. There are some pockets here and there. There are some moments within this track where there is a little bit of taking the foot off the pedal, and you get more into that ambient experience, that sci-fi, almost psychedelic experience. And it's important to have it at the closing track because of the nature of the record demands it. And it's also nice that they have that kind of experience to close off the song, closing off the record. But overall, it's a track that really lives off of the more brutal side of the band. It's more consistent in that part of their musical spectrum, and it's a song that puts just like an exclamation mark on the album, because it becomes the climax, it becomes the finale, it becomes the curtain call. It's all of it in one single track. This is it, Blood Incantation, Absolute Elsewhere. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the record. Hit me up in the comment section, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take care, guys.